You guys read this interview with the showrunners of The Witcher? I can't believe this is real. It's no wonder their show turned to shit. Hey, what's up, bookworms and fantasy lovers, guys? Today we're talk about something a little personal, and that is adaptations of all these beautiful fantasy stories that we've known and come to love over the years. Because, guys, I used to beg for these things to get made, and now when I hear that one has the rights have been purchased and it's going to be adapted, I'm kind of hoping against it because the results have been less than stellar, guys. Rings of Power, The Witcher, Shannara, Wheel of Time, He-Man. What do these all have in common? They are new fantasy adaptations that have been received pretty poorly, and they haven't. There haven't been very nice things said about them by people who love the books. So, what's the problem? Why can't they get these fantasy adaptations right? Well, that's what we're here to talk about. And guys, I'm going to be honest, this is just my opinion. These are things, I have a background in business and marketing, so I feel like I can give my opinion about why these are failing. These are going to be some things that like ruffle some people's feathers. I know. Again, I approach everything from a business standpoint. There are no personal feelings here on these things. Outside of these are properties I love, and I'm tired of seeing them being treated so poorly. So again, just a warning there that if this is, you say for example, you're one of the people who thinks that Disney has done great things to Star Wars, this might not be the video for you. You know, because I'm going to present reasons why I think that these are failing. These are all failing. And how can we fix it? You know, how can this be improved? Because at this point, I think in a post-Game of Thrones world, we have proven that fantasy can be adapted right if there are the right people behind it and the right, I guess you say, showrunners and the right money. Let's put it that way. So let's just kind of get into it, guys. Here I have 10 reasons here why all these fantasy adaptations are failing. First up, guys, everything is trying to be the next Game of Thrones. That's the big one. Now, obviously, Game of Thrones just it exceeded everyone's expectations, even mine. I was a big fan of the books. I was very excited about the series when it was coming out because it did sound like they loved the books and they were very anxious to adapt them. And it was a very literal adaptation until they ran out of source material, and we kind of all know how that went. But here's the thing. It was perfect timing for Game of Thrones when it came out. You know, it was a different time, I feel like, in media. And I just feel like you can't replicate that. You can't catch lightning in a bottle twice. So when you're just trying to be exactly like Game of Thrones, fans see through it a mile away. And they're like, this just feels like Walmart Game of Thrones. That's what nobody's looking for. So I feel like HBO gets what makes fantasy adaptations work. And they're fine with just having, you know, Westeros. They're fine with just having A Song of Ice and Fire. They don't want to adapt a bunch of other fantasy series. So that's why you see all these others trying to play catch up by either copying or going out of their way to try to be the anti-Game of Thrones. But then you see other adaptations where it's nothing is quite as brutal or grim or sexual as Game of Thrones, and they're trying to overly sexualize it just to catch up with HBO. And it's just a bad formula. So again, I think trying to be Game of Thrones or trying to be the anti-Game of Thrones, it's not worked for anyone. And I think they just need to kind of go out on their own. Next up, guys, this one's pretty obvious. They have no love for the source material. And that's just not a winning formula here. I mean, a lot of these companies, they don't even know what they have. Like, I'm pretty sure at this point, Amazon thought, we've got Lord of the Rings, and we've also got Wheel of Time. I don't really know. I mean, I know Lord of the Rings is popular. What is Wheel of Time? I don't think they even know what they had. They had no idea that this is probably behind Tolkien the most popular fantasy series out there, you know, ever. So I don't think they even knew this. They had no idea how big the fandom was. They had no idea really the source code that they had. And so they've kind of squandered it. I mean, I feel like that's kind of a matter of opinion. I feel like most people who have read it are not pleased with it, but there are some out there who still defend the adaptation. I'm not one of them. I tried for a while. I try to be positive on these things. But a lot of these instances, it's just name recognition. They feel like, oh, it's got a name. It's got an established fandom. They're going to see it no matter what. So just make whatever you want. So yeah, a lot of the times, guys, the truth of this, and I've talked to a lot of authors about this that have had their rights purchased, is they're saying that their rights to their stories will get purchased by studios just to keep them from their competitors. They have no interest in making them, or if they do make them, it's just before that contract expires, and they don't want to lose the rights to it. So I feel like that's what was going on with Wheel of Time. I feel like they were just like, hey, let's just make something because, hey, we're going to lose the rights back to the estate. But, who knows with these things? A lot of the stuff is never going to be known to us. Next up, guys, money can't buy you love. I think something that you've seen, especially with Bezos, I don't mean to be picking on just Amazon here. I think there's the most glaring one since they have like the 2 biggest fantasy properties and they've just done bad things to them, is everything's just trying to throw money at the problem. Now, look, fantasy's not cheap to adapt. We all know this. And a lot of times the complaint is, look, fantasy has a niche audience, but it requires a lot of money to make this. And then there are not going to be a lot of people watching it. So no one wants to kind of pour that much money into it. So Bezos is like, here, I'm going to throw $100 million a season at Wheel of Time. I'm going to throw $250 million for the first season of Rings of Power. And if the money's not being used in the right places, I feel like it's never going to work out. So you can't just throw money at the problem and think it's going to fix everything. Does it look beautiful? Some might say. But it feels like the money isn't being spent in the right places, which I'll get into in a couple of other points here. But yeah, they're just spending it in the wrong places, and you're just making your product expensive and look expensive. It's just going to have people being like, where'd all the money go if the show isn't good? That's where I am at with Rings of Power. Like, this is $250 million because I would expect it to look like something I would see at the movie theater. And I never once got that feeling, where I do kind of get that feeling with what HBO does. So it's just something about the aesthetic that they chose with that just looked cheap. It just didn't feel like a $250 million product, right? So again, I don't think throwing money at the problem is just going to fix everything. You still have to make sure you're hiring the right people and you're doing the right marketing. That brings me to my next point, guys. Horrible or lack thereof marketing. They're not marketing these things very well. Now, either they don't show anything or the trailers show everything, or again, it's one of those where you're trying to get casuals here. People that read the books, they're interested already if you're making a faithful adaptation. But with a lot of time with these trailers is either they tell you absolutely not, like you'll watch a trailer and be like, I have no idea what that was about. Or they'll watch it and they'll put like some 80s pop song slowed down 1/16th, and you'll be like, what am I watching here? I don't really understand what this is. So I feel like fantasy is a very, very tough sell to casuals, people who aren't into fantasy. In fact, guys, I remember being an advocate for Game of Thrones before that first season, begging everyone that I knew to watch it. And they're like, I just don't like fantasy. And I'm like, just shut up. It's not like that, And the same thing happened with Lord of the Rings. It's just you had to really force people almost to see it. And Game of Thrones succeeded by word of mouth. It didn't succeed by its marketing. So it wasn't even marketed properly, in my opinion. So I feel like if you ever even see, Wheel of Time, did you even see a trailer before like 3 weeks before the show came out? Did you see any ads, any marketing anywhere for it? Nothing. I feel like that's a post-Netflix world. Is Netflix is just like, we're just going to drop it on this date. Boom, there it's done. Then I feel like everyone else feels like they can do that when they don't have the foothold that Netflix does at this point. So they can't get away with that, much like the others. But with all these streaming series, they don't advertise them at all. I don't feel like they're trying to push it out there to anyone who would be interested, the target audience for these. And that falls back under, money can't buy you love. You need to spend the money well, and you need to spend the money on marketing as well as other things, not just what's being seen on the screen. You need to make sure that you got consumers interested in it, and I don't feel like they do that very, very well. The other part of that budget, guys, is hiring the people that are going to be running your show, and that is the whole point of this one, is making the wrong hires. This is probably the biggest problem. If you're going to look at anything on this list, this is probably the biggest problem. They are hiring the wrong people to make these adaptations. Why did Lord of the Rings work? Why did Game of Thrones work? Why is House of the Dragon working? Because they hired people that loved the source material and they wanted to make sure that they did right by what was on the page. You don't get that anymore. Now look, I understand a studio, they want some comfort. They want to know this person has run a successful show before, so they know what they're doing. Problem is, if they don't know anything about what they're getting into, and be honest, a lot of those people look down their nose at fantasy. Again, listen to what the Witcher showrunners have said. Do they sound like people who love the fantasy genre? I don't think so. So to me, the biggest red flag is when you hire someone who's like, I've never read it, I've never heard of it, I don't know anything about it. That doesn't sound like someone who's going to respect the source material or how valuable it is to readers. And to me, that's just like insane. How could you possibly do that? How could you hire that person when they know nothing about the product? If you were running a business and you had an opening at CEO, would you hire a CEO that neither knows what your product is, cares what your product is, or gives a damn about what happens to your product? I don't think so. And I think this should be treated the same way. Hire people who love the product. There's lots of smart people out there, guys, in the business who have probably read these books before. And you probably got people begging for these jobs, but you're like, oh no, I want to go with the safe pick, someone who's run some show on ABC or something somewhere. And it's easy to see why they're failing, because you're hiring the wrong people. And that falls into some of the screenwriters here. They think that they're better writers than the original authors. Now, I've talked about this with Stephen King for years. Every time you get a screenwriter doing a screenplay for a Stephen King book, they're always like, oh, well, I'm a better writer than Stephen King. I can fix this. And what happens? It's terrible. It turns out awful, you know. I think they have a hard time understanding that the reason that these are popular in the first place is because the writers could write. And a lot of the times they have the writers right there for consulting to tell them what needs to be done on screen, and they either dismiss them or they completely ignore them, you know. And that's just amazing to me. You don't want the person who is the brainchild of this product telling you what you should and should not do on the screen. That makes no sense to me. Now, I'm not saying let them control your product. I'm just saying listen to them when they say what's probably going to work and what's probably not going to work. And I understand, guys, when it comes to transitioning something to the screen from the page, I understand it can't be page for page sometimes. There's some things that just don't translate. When you try to do that, you get Dune 1984, and you got where we can hear everybody's inner monologue. Clearly, that doesn't work on the screen, right? So I try to give these things a little bit of leeway. If you remember when Madison and I were reviewing the Wheel of Time episodes after each week, we were trying to be positive about it and saying, look, I can understand why they did this. I can understand why they did that. Don't know what they were thinking there, but I can see why they did this. So we try to look at these things and say, hey, I get why you can't do that on the screen. But I don't understand why these screenwriters think that they're better writers than the original story. I feel like anytime they come out and say, oh, well, you know, the books are great, but we're going to do our own thing, or we're going to make it our own. Biggest red flag in the world. You know right away they have no interest in adapting this story. When Rafe Judkins says, oh, well, treat this as another turning of the wheel, that's a get-out-of-jail-free card that I can change anything that I want, and I can just say, oh, it's a different turning of the wheel. And that, to me, is like, then why are you adapting it? You're not adapting the story. You're just making something else in this world. It makes no sense to me. And so anytime you say, we're making it our own, that means we're not going to be faithful to the book. When you say it's the story that Tolkien can never write, when you say, oh, it's a story that Robert Jordan would write if he was still with us today, I don't know if this is just hubris or if they just think they're smarter than everyone else. I have no idea what they're thinking when they say something like that. It's like, did you really think that was a smart thing to say? So you're putting yourself behind the 8 ball right away, and you're never going to win fans over by saying that you're going to do something different than what they read and loved. Now, again, I'm not like most fans. I understand some things got to be changed for the screen, but damn it still needs to feel like that book that I read. You know, I mean, make it feel like that's the same story at least, you know, not just this product in name only. That's why a lot of the stuff has kind of went downhill, because these writers are just out of control, and I understand they want to kind of leave their imprint on something. They don't want to just basically make a Cliff Notes version of something that someone else already wrote. I get that's where it started. But now it's just kind of gotten to the point where it's like, you sure you read this? You sure? You sure you know anything about it at all? So that's a big one. Treating established fandoms as the enemy. This one is just, man, nothing gets me hotter than this one, because every fandom has that small little minority of shitheels. I get that. Everyone. Big Star Wars fan, guys, and I understand Star Wars fans can be awful sometimes. But it's the blanket statements about fandoms. Angry blanket statements applying a really negative connotation to a fandom as a whole because they rejected your product. That's a big no-no. I mean, look, it doesn't take a business major to understand that don't bite the hand that feeds. And they are just viciously attacking fandoms now. And what's really amazing to me is before something even comes out, they're attacking fandoms. I remember right before Rings of Power came out, there was an article in Variety blasting the fans. We hadn't even seen a trailer yet. To me, that doesn't sound like you have a ton of confidence in your product, right? So I feel like that's another get out of jail free card. When everybody's like, if the studio execs, their bosses are like, hey, what's going on with the negative reception? It's just, a bunch of this and that. It's just angry fans and stuff. It's just, and it's, what I'm talking about. It feels like it's just an excuse, and it just kind of gets brushed over, and no one ever says anything about it. Henry Cavill was the first one who came out and said, fans are not the enemy. And what do you know? A year later, he's gone from Witcher. Weird how the timing of that happens, right? Speaking of The Witcher, did you guys read that interview? There was an interview they did with the showrunners where they're basically saying that they think that the audience was too stupid to understand these books, so they dumbed the show down on purpose because they didn't believe their audience would get it. I can't believe that article is real. And there's so much more in that article, guys. Go find that article with the Witcher showrunners. And it's easy to see why that show has fell off of a cliff. I mean, besides saying they actively dislike the books, and you let your A-list actor get away because you refuse to stay loyal to the source material? Again, I don't really understand. But again, it's just attacking fans all the time. You see this. I mean, Disney's the kings of this. Just anything that Disney does. Oh, it's just the fans. It's the fans' fault. It's never our fault. And it's awful. And that falls under my next point, not listening to your audience. Now, I understand what you're saying right now. I'm saying, oh, well, they shouldn't have to bend the knee to fans. I'm not saying they got to listen and do everything that the fans want to do. But the first rule of business school, guys, give your audience what they want. This isn't hard. I don't understand why you would intentionally try to shit in the audience's mouth. What is the goal here? I don't get it. You don't have to bend your knee to the audiences. You can do your own thing while also staying very, very faithful and respectful to the product. That's the big one. Be respectful, especially to legendary characters. I don't know why the bait and switch and the disrespecting and dressing down of legendary characters. I will never understand where it's coming from. What reaction do you think that you're going to get? Unless that's your goal, it's just to get a reaction. It's not to make something that people are going to love and cherish for decades. It's just to get a reaction, pissing your audience off. That seems to be something they're just really into now. I don't understand why it's so hard to listen to feedback instead of just angrily replying and casting a label on them. That makes no sense at all to me. And it's easy to see why a lot of these products are failing, because fans are tired of it. They're tired of being blamed for these really, really bad adaptations. It's no one's fault but the people in control. The fans aren't the ones behind the camera. They're not the ones in the writer's room, So I don't know. And I kind of already tipped my hand there, but the next one is being intentionally divisive. Don't get it at all. I don't get it all. Ever since Last Jedi, when Rian Johnson came out and basically said, I want the audience to be mad. And it seems like they just get joy now out of saying, how can we piss the audience off? We'll never understand this one, guys. Because I would think in business, your number one hope is first, your movie or TV series becomes something treasured forever, right? Something that's just going to go down in the preservation society. That's your ultimate goal, right? Second goal has got to be making money, for sure. Is your first goal now just to piss the audience off? I have no idea how this started. It seems like it was like, now they kind of want the audiences to feel like they've got to take a side. And journalists play a large part of this lately. Look what happened with Barbie. Before that movie even came out, you had people ready to kill each other over a movie because journalists just want to make us just fight. I don't understand this. And I think it's just that age-old thing where there's no such press as bad press. They think, we come out, we attack the fandoms, it'll get our names out there, and people will be so interested, they'll pay to go see our product now. It's not working that way. So I feel like it's just a failing method, but they just keep on doing it. But applying negative connotations to your viewers, like I said, because they hold a specific view to your product, like if you didn't like our movie, it's because this. Not we made a bad movie, it's because you're this. That's being intentionally divisive. You're doing that on purpose, and you're dividing your audience. I'll never understand that. As someone that works in business, I'll never get that. Why do you want to divide your audience? I don't know. It's nothing that makes sense to me. So trying to create fake outrage, that's just something that doesn't really click with me at all. Lastly, guys, zero accountability. Kind of touched on it a little bit. Why does this keep happening? Because all of these people in charge, they keep failing upwards. I got some examples here. Rafe Judkins, he's butchered Wheel of Time. It doesn't look like season 2 is going to go much better. And what happened? He's been gifted God of War, right? Kathleen Kennedy kind of ruined 2 I mean, two of the biggest IPs ever. I mean, you've poisoned the well of Star Wars, the most successful franchise in the history of cinema. And they don't even have any new movies coming out because no one wants to touch them with a 10-foot pole. And she's lost Lucasfilm a boatload of money. From what I hear, she's getting her contract renewed. Dan and Dave, they punted on the last season of Game of Thrones because they just wanted to be done with it. What happened to them? They got a huge deal with Netflix. They're going to be doing the three-body problem now. So as long as these people keep failing upward, there's no incentive for them to want to try to do better by this. They will come out and blast the consumer. They will make a really crappy product, and they'll move on to their next thing and get paid handsomely to do it. So, of course, why would they change? Why would they change at all? So you make a divisive and a subpar product, you blame the audience, you call them names, you move on to the next thing. That seems to be the pattern right now. So it's just going to keep happening until there is some accountability for these things. You will never see anyone change anything until they are held responsible for what they've been doing. So, guys, final thoughts here. Until the first step forward is finding showrunners and writers that love the source material, nothing's going to change. It's going to be just like it has been right now. Why did House of the Dragon work? Because Ryan Condal loves the source material. Because George R. R. Martin is a consultant and they want to do right by him. And he insists that they stay true to what he has written. So he doesn't want another season 8. Trust me, he doesn't. So that's why with him, with House of the Dragon, it was very important to him that it was a very, very literal adaptation. And Ryan Condal was happy to oblige. That's why it's worked out, And of course, again, like I said, HBO seems to have cracked the code. So it might be hanging the banner a little high there for everyone else to try to reach. And it is. A lot of people are just trying to play catch up with HBO. But look, it's not hard. Listen to your constructive criticism and realize that fans are not the enemy. They're telling you what they want. It's not hard to figure out what the people want. It's not. First of all, social media is not real life. Talk to some people. Listen to test audiences, things like that. Listen to people who have actually read these books. I mean, there's tons of people and authors. There's other authors out there who would love to help on the writer's room. There's so many people who would be willing to help out and give you constructive criticism and feedback to give people what they want. Because in the end, guys, that's what makes business work, giving the consumer what they want. And they haven't been doing that. They haven't been making these products for the consumer anymore. They've been making them for each other, for their own little echo chamber. And it's just been a downward slide. And it's at this point where a good adaptation comes out and it actually shocks us. I think the only one I haven't been shocked with was Dune, because I knew how much Denny V loved and admired that book, and he would said he was making that movie for Frank Herbert if he was still with us, and that's how you know you got something in the right hands. Most of the time, you go and read anything about these people running some of these shows, and they're like, I don't know nothing about it, don't care. And it's just, to me, it's very, very easy to see when something's going to fail, something's going to succeed. And I wish that they would stop trying to make headlines and they would start trying to make good products. So guys, that is, again, just my opinion, why I think a lot of these fantasy adaptations are failing. Again, you might feel differently, and that's okay. If you like some of these things that have been produced, great. I'm happy for you. In the end, I want people to enjoy things. I feel like I'm sticking to the side of fantasy readers who have been very disgruntled with how these things have turned out. Now, look, I always try to be positive. There are channels out there you can find where they're going to be negative about something regardless. Even when it turns out good, they'll find a way to be negative about it. They made a lot of money doing that. That's not me. That's not me. I'm always going to apply things with my head, not my heart when it comes to this. And trying to put it into business acumen is something that I feel like I can do and feel like I don't have the magic bullet. I don't have all the answers for this. I know there's probably a lot more things that go on behind the scenes into making these, but I feel like these base causes are why all these things are failing. And I'd be interested to know if you agree or disagree. Conversation's always welcome here. That's what I would like to know. So if you think I'm a complete moron, you're allowed to do that. Drop in the comments and tell me why. If you think you agree with some of these points, or hell, you have some of your own, go ahead and drop those down below. It's a safe community here, guys. You can talk about anything that you want to down below. Keep it respectful. That's always what I ask. But again, I just want to see these things that I love, and I've been waiting my whole life to see get adapted, and I want to see them done with love and care. And if they fail, it's because they failed because there just wasn't an interest in it, not because they decided to completely bastardize the source material. That is my one true hope. So guys, let me know what you think down in the comments, and I will talk to you there.